Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's P&G Alumni Network webinar series. This is your host, Ileana Rojas, and I'll be emceeing for today. I'm very excited for our guest today, Shane Meeker, who will be sharing with us how telling stories will make better connections with our audience. But before I pass it on the baton to Shane, let me take you through a couple of announcements on how the web series works. This is a monthly series where our goal is to connect members and provide enriching content where we hope you learn something new and leave you inspired. And we do this by leveraging the expertise that we have within the network. Our webinars are also recorded so that you can go back and review anything you want to listen to again or share with your friends via our P&G Alumni Network YouTube channel. All of this is part of a bigger mission of the P&G Alumni Network, which is a nonprofit founded by former P&G employees to share ideas, talents, and resources with each other, our communities, and philanthropy efforts. With more than 35,000 registered members in 45 chapters worldwide, the P&G Alumni Network is officially recognized and supported by P&G. We connect via global conferences, local chapters, industry events, and online content. Our nonprofit foundation supports economic empowerment initiatives in communities around the world. Now, if you're not yet aware already, our 2019 Global Conference is in Madrid, Spain, set for October 24th through the 26th. Our last conference was held in Cincinnati in October 2017 and was a huge success, attended by alums from all over the world, including inspiring and thought-provoking speakers and breakout sessions and workshops. We hope to see you this coming October at our next conference to be held at the Intercontinental in Madrid. You can find more information on the network's website at pngalums.com, which, by the way, just relaunched. And if you haven't checked it out, I invite you to do so. I also invite you to register to receive P&G Alumni Network newsletters and emails, where you will receive more information about the global conference, as well as other exciting events from each of the chapters near you. Now, a couple of notes on the webinar logistics. This is your webinar screen. This is where you'll see content, polls, slides, etc. One thing you won't see is webcams. To the right, you'll see the control panel. You'll notice that your line is muted to avoid hearing dogs barking in the back or other distracting noises. But don't worry. If you have questions, you'll still be able to ask them through the control panel at any time through the webinar, and we'll have time towards the end of the webinar to go through them. Now, note that the questions you ask will only be visible to me. I do apologize beforehand if I don't get to them, but I will do my best to go through most of them. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to Shane Meeker, who will be speaking to us today about the story Mythos, a movie guide to better business stories. Shane, thank you so much for being with us today, and now I'll pass it on to you so you can take us through your bio and share us highlights.
Thank you so much. All right, let me just switch over here. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Such a pleasure to be talking to my extended P&G family, and hopefully you'll find this interesting and helpful. I want to just kind of go through in 30 minutes or so and touch on a little bit of the power of storytelling. And I know everybody on the phone knows that stories are incredibly powerful, and we know that stories are one of the best ways to inspire, one of the best ways to create and share an idea, one of the best ways for inspiration and memorability. But I just want to give you a little bit of backdrop in it. And I'm the P&G company historian and corporate storyteller. And one of the things that I do both inside and outside of P&G is teach story fundamentals, principles, and tools to different companies and organizations. And I started this very kind of, I suppose, serendipitously. So I was in our design function at P&G for 15 of my 22 years. And almost 20 years ago, I had a screenplay idea. I'm a big movie buff and wanted to write it, and started digging into it. And I quickly realized that no matter how many movies I had watched, it did not actually help me write one. In fact, it hurts you, quite frankly. It actually goes against you the more that you've seen because you start to create all these cliche scenes and things. And so I needed to put in what Malcolm Gladwell would call, your 10,000 hours of practice. And I simply had not practiced, really writing a screenplay. So I have a brother who lives in Los Angeles, and I started spending my weekends in LA. So during the week at P&G, weekends fly out to LA, taking screenplay classes and courses. I did that for a long time. Took a lot of classes also in New York and Chicago. And one day after a few years of research, I basically just came to this revelation that, wow, every single thing I'm learning, I could apply back at P&G. And I worked at Pampers at the time, and I went to my boss in Pampers, and I said, "Hey, I think I figured out how we can use what works in Star Wars to solve innovation problems." And and trust me, you got to have the right boss when you say something like that. And I did, and she was like, "Well, I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but I'm intrigued. Why don't you write something up?" And in the beginning, it was 10% of my job, if even that much. And then it, kind of became 20% and then 50%, and then eventually full time. And then when the historian role opened up, they asked if I wanted to take that because I could kind of maintain and teach my story discipline out of the Heritage Center while being the historian as well, which is all about sharing stories of the company. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So I love stories. I love it. I love every part of it. I love breaking down and understanding the fundamentals and principles behind them. And I call my content story mythos, which basically means a set of beliefs about story. And please do check out my site at storymythos.com. And I also have a book out on Amazon and Kindle called Story Mythos, a movie guide to better business stories. And so without further ado, let's get started. And, whoops, sorry. One of the important things of story in the business world today is that we all know there's two ways to share, right? And I love this quote. I mean, you can either push your information, and sometimes you have to, don't get me wrong, or you can pull people in with a story. And I really try to live and breathe this, quite frankly. I mean, sometimes you do just have to give the information out, but it's so much more impactful if you can pull people in with something that's got emotion or something that's got, characters, a lesson, an idea that they can actually relate to and have empathy for. And more as technology continues to become democratized, we know that story in the business world plays an even more critical role. I mean, it's definitely not something new. A lot of the story has become kind of a buzzword in the last several years. But if you really think about it, no company has ever been able to survive without having an impactful, meaningful, and easy to understand story. So it's always been important. I think if anything today, companies are paying a bit more attention to it, and especially in how it gets created. Again, simply because technology continues to be democratized, and as everyone has access to pretty darn good tech, your story becomes this extra level of differentiator that becomes really important. And story in business has two key roles. It definitely explains who you are. And then the real important one is it explains, and why should I care? Right? I mean, because every industry has good competition and good competitors in it. I don't care what you make, from video games to soap. So in those, people now, it's not what they buy, it's what they buy into in many situations. And they want to understand more of that story. They want to know, why you do what you do, and what drives you, and what your purpose is, and what your values are, and to hear some of the stories about your employees and how you think about innovation and things like that. So it becomes really important that everyone in your company can clearly articulate and share what your story is, including what role you play in that story. And great storytellers understand a couple key principles. And one of the ones that I want to make sure that I really stress today is that stories in business are always a mix of head and heart, not head or heart. You can't just give all numbers and expect that to be an impactful story. You also can't just give all emotion and expect that to do it, because people are going to want some information to back it up. So you need a mix of both. And depending upon the story, you'll have to adjust which you need more of or which you need less of. But you need emotion to pull them in, and then you need the head to back it up. And the reason why you need both is to help create this thing called empathy. And empathy is one of the most critical, factors in every company's success. And this is the definition from an unknown, and I love it and I always use it. But empathy is seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. And I don't think that could be said better. Empathy is the key to success in almost any company that has a customer or a consumer. Because if you can't put yourself in their shoes, then you're going to create products that they don't necessarily want or understand. And of course, this is the secret to Hollywood too, right? Is that they can create characters that we can jump into and create a connection with, and that's why you can have empathy for a dad trying to make the world's purest meth, or a rat trying to learn to cook, or a sister protecting her little sister in the Hunger Games. I mean, they create characters that we can jump into, and that requires a good understanding of head and heart. What do I need to pull them in, and what do I need to back it up? And empathy is the driver in storytelling. If I can't empathize with the characters, the story is over. And I want to give a caution, because I know that there's a lot of business experts on the phone. I just want to give a caution with numbers and statistics, because I know that we all got to deal with data, lots of data, right? And just always be careful with it. Remember that people hear statistics, but they feel a story. So I'll give you a funny example around that, which is, as all of you may know or may not know, Cincinnati has the second biggest Oktoberfest in the world, only behind Munich. And in fact, we're called a sister city for that reason. And of course, that German heritage is actually critical to the history of P&G as well, since the pork and beer exports in the early 1800s were one of the reasons the city was shaped the way that it was. But I'm a big craft beer fan myself, and in fact, I just was at a celebration this past weekend where they had a bunch of new craft beers, and I enjoyed trying them. And so one day, though, not long ago, I was curious on, is beer good for you, right? Because I like to drink it, so I wanted to check. So I went to Google and I typed in, is alcohol good for you? And good news, 49,300,000 results say that it is. And if you look at this page capture, you'll see that everyone from Shape Magazine to Time.com to Wired was getting in on it, saying, yep, there's good things about alcohol. And I clicked on some of those headlines and I saw things like, did you know that drinking a few times a week can reduce diabetes risk? Or that drinking alcohol after studying may improve your memory? Or that study out of the University of California, Irvine, that basically, said that, did you know that moderate amounts of alcohol and coffee are now linked to living a longer life? Right? I mean, that's fantastic news. I was like, okay, great. But now, as a good researcher, you got to look at both sides of things too. So then I typed into Google, is alcohol bad for you? And there were some hits on that too, I will tell you. There was 79 million. So 49 million said, good, 79 million said bad. I mean, that's kind of a rounding error with that big of a number, right? I mean, geez. But anyway, I clicked on some of those headlines, and I did see that researchers warn even moderate alcohol consumption can cause brain damage. And that Public Health England warns that consumption of alcohol is linked to a vast number of other serious illnesses and diseases, ranging from heart and liver to cancers. And this was just late last year that this BBC study was done, and actually, according to them, no alcohol is safe to drink at all. New global study confirms no alcohol is safe to drink, not one drink. So my question then becomes, who's telling the truth? And the answer is whichever one supports the story that you want to believe, because they both are. They both are. All of these studies at some level are sharing a truth. And that's what you have to be careful with data. Numbers alone aren't going to get people to completely switch, to try something different, to change a habit, to whatever, especially if it's something that they're used to. So always remember that stories anchor beliefs, And if you already have a story, the only thing that will change your mind is a better story. As a runner, I can tell you this is absolutely true, because most runners, and I've seen studies on this, data on it, which is that runners are very loyal to their shoe. I mean, some runners are so loyal to their shoe that they'll buy multiple pairs of the same shoe in fear that that company may actually quit making that shoe. And there's not a print ad or a number, honestly, that would get them to change. And usually what does is when they're actually creating a personal connection with someone at the running store or something, and that, they bring up an issue or a problem they're having, and then that person starts, saying, you know what you need, then you need this, and maybe a little bit more of this, I got the perfect shoe for you. And then they bring it out, you try it on, they make you run in it for a little bit, and then you're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, that feels better. And then you take it home, right? I mean, they help you change the story by being part of it. So just always remember that. Again, I'm not saying data is not helpful. Of course it is, but head and heart, not head or heart. So let's also step back and talk a little bit of film school 101, because what is a story? And I could give you several great definitions from a lot of different story masters from around the world, from Joseph Campbell to Robert McKee to Christopher Vogler and others. But one of the simplest ways that I can describe a story is to tell you this. So we all have heard of, you have to have a plot. A plot is what happens in a story. And I will tell you that no one will on the phone will ever invent a new plot. All the plots are out. And even Hollywood has been rehashing the same plots over and over. Everything is a remix. The plots are all out. It's really just how you bring it to life in a different way. For example, P&G has been working on a key plot line for a long time. In fact, since 1837, on how to get clothes cleaner, right? So people don't really pay for plots. You need it. It's a backbone, but they don't pay for it. Like, one of the most financially successful plot lines in history is about a big ship sinking. And I will tell you that I doubt anybody went to watch that film wondering if that ship was going to make it to port. I mean, everybody knew what was going to happen. See, they didn't pay for the plot. What they paid for was the story. And look at the difference. If the plot is just what happens, the story is what people feel and do because of what happens. We always pay for the human connection part of that, to have that empathy, to put ourselves into people's shoes and situations and try to imagine, to see the struggle and the joy and the terror and the excitement and whatever the story may be, whatever the movie is, whatever the book is. I mean, we do that to put ourselves into the situation. We pay to see what people feel and do because of what happens. So always remember that human connection is truly the story. The plot is just the start to get you there. But if you don't have people in it that the audience wants to interact with, the plot will fall, regardless of what happens. And stories are like recipes. They're like cooking. And what I mean by that is, I know that in business we like our formulas and we like predictable repeat and stuff like that, but just always remember this. Are there bad movies launched every year? Are there bad books? Are there bad shows on Netflix? Are there bad, you get the idea. Are there plays that don't make it to Broadway? Of course there are, all the time. If there was a formula for the guaranteed hit story, Hollywood would have been the first to figure it out by now. So don't ever believe anybody that tells you there's a formula for the guaranteed hit story. It doesn't exist. And trust me, every director, even the most successful ones, have had flops. Same with authors and writers. And that's because you're dealing with emotion. And every time that you create a great story, you change the bar. You change what people expect. And that's what makes it tough. So, we often in companies, honestly, we all deal in sequels. Everything's about sequels, right? P&G, everything's about sequels. At the companies you're at now, it's all about sequels, right? You launch this product and you basically want to launch a sequel to it. And the sequel is, how can we take that brand or that product idea and raise the bar even more? And always remember too that your audiences kind of expect that. Like if you launch this awesome new product that everybody loves, guess what they expect of your next one? They sure don't want something less. And that's why, when Toy Story launched, when we heard Toy Story 2 was coming out, we were like, wow, I can't see what they do. And then we heard Toy Story 3 was coming out. I was like, wow, now what are they going to do? And that can make it really tough. And that's why there is no formula, because you can't formalize emotion. And what made people laugh 5 years ago may not make them laugh anymore. What scared them 10 years ago may not scare them anymore. So William Goldman, who's a very famous screenwriter in Hollywood's got a great quote that I always remember, which is, at the end of the day in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. Not one person in the entire motion picture field knows for certainty what's going to work. Every time it's a guess, and if you're lucky, it's an educated one. And again, it's because emotion is tough. You may do one campaign 1 year that was awesome and try the exact same process that you used to develop it the next year, and it totally falls or doesn't do near as good as the last one. I mean, that happens. So it's like a recipe. It's like cooking, because hopefully everyone would agree with me that you can give great ingredients to a terrible cook and their dish will still be bad. On the flip side, you can give mediocre or even bad ingredients to a master chef, and it's amazing they can come up with something. And they do, and they come up with something that's awesome. In fact, there's a whole TV show on that idea. It's called Chopped. And Chopped is all about that. It doesn't matter what the ingredients are, it all in the end comes down to skill, craft, and creativity. That's what's most important in storytelling too. It's not the plot, it's the story. And that's where craft, know-how, understanding, and empathy come into play. And just because you knew that for one story doesn't mean that's always going to work the exact same way for the next one. You may have to change things. You may have to change the narrative. So I'm going to give you a simple recipe to remember. First of all, there's normally a handful of ingredients that I talk about. For the sake of time, we don't. There's usually 6 that I share. But we don't have time for all that. And again, the ingredients aren't as important. And I'll remind you that Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 and The Godfather Part 2 have the same basic ingredients in that I'm showing on screen here. But it's what you do with them that can change things. All right. So again, it's the skill, the know-how, and the trial and error. So having the ingredients does not mean your story is going to be good. That just gives you some place to start with. It's what you do with them that's going to matter. And I can't go through all these, but I will give you the simplest version of how to think about these. And I can sum up every story in the world in one simple sentence, which is a hero must go through an obstacle to get to a treasure. And in my opinion, those are the 3 main ingredients, honestly, that you really need. I mean, if you're making an apple pie, I mean, this is the apples, in the crust. I mean, these are really, really important. So you gotta have a hero that I can empathize with, a hero that I want to follow, a hero that I understand. If I don't think what the hero is doing is worth doing, the story will be over. You've got to have an obstacle. An obstacle is the lifeblood of the story. In fact, Robert McKee often will remind writers and movie makers that your story is only as powerful as the forces of antagonism allow it to be. If you have a weak problem, you probably will end up with a very weak story. If you're solving a weak problem, it will feel like a weak story. I mean, if Jaws is a 1.5 foot long barracuda, the story just doesn't work, And then you've got to have a treasure, something that's compelling and motivating enough to get our characters to want to go through trouble. And, you just have to decide what that is. And that comes from research, right? That comes from understanding your consumers and your customers and knowing what they really need. And that could be both spoken and unspoken needs. And that comes again with research and observation, doing in-homes, right? Seeing where they use the product. Now, which of these is your brand then? Because we all work on brands and companies. You may even be your own brand. Which of these are you then? right? If you make yourself the hero, you just took your audience out of the story, or your consumer or your customer. Don't make your brand the hero. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes you do. Plus, that sounds and starts to lead down a road of arrogance, in my opinion. So be very, very careful with that. Brands are not heroes. You definitely don't want to be the big one, the obstacle. Don't do that. And you're not the treasure, because maybe they want clean clothes. Well, the reality is there's a lot of ways to do that, and a lot of other products out there to do that. So, and you're not the only one. So you're not the hero. You don't want to be the obstacle, and you're not the treasure. So which one are you? So here's the cool thing. In every story construct, there's always a certain archetype and character role that shows up. They don't always have to be an actual character. They can be a thing. They can be a book. They can be an idea. They can be an environment. They can be a lot of things. But that thing is called a mentor. And a mentor has two key roles for a story. The first is they guide, inspire the hero. And the second is that they give the hero items to help them on their journey. And oddly enough, they always appear right before the trouble. It's funny how they do that. So really what all of you are, what all of your companies are, what all of your brands are, is Glinda the Good Witch and Dumbledore and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And your job is to give your consumers and your customers ruby slippers and lightsabers and inspiration. I mean, that's what you do, right? So the brand is always the mentor. So I also want to give you a few ways to unlock your inner storyteller. And I know that on the line, I've already got some brilliant storytellers, and everyone's has their own way of telling stories. Some people are better at writing them, some are better at visualizing them, some are better at presenting them, some are better at researching them. I mean, you'll notice at the end of a movie credits, there's not just one name. There's a reason for that, because you need a lot of different expertise and areas of passion to really create a compelling story. And so, that's why you've got to lean on your colleagues and your friends and your coworkers on, hey, I'm really good at kind of pulling apart the fundamentals of story, but I need someone who's a really good copywriter, and I know you're good at that. And I need someone who's really great at finding the best visuals to bring my story to life. Pull people in as you do that, but everyone has a storyteller in them. Everyone does. And I'll give you 4 quick behaviors that are really important in unlocking your inner storyteller. The first is, it's really important that you share personal stories. Every storyteller needs to really rely on their personal stories to bring people in, to get them to know them, to share vulnerability, to create authenticity and approachability. Personal stories do that. I mean, and we hear that all the time in leadership trainings and presentations as well, how important personal stories are in creating connection. Learn to steal and remix. Like I told you, everything's a remix. There's no new plots. But that doesn't mean that you can't do something amazing with the plots that are out there in remixing it into something different. So, look around at what people are watching, what people are doing, what they're listening to, and say, great, what can I take from that and use in my idea? And that goes with innovation too. Like if you want to disrupt the aisle that you're in, honestly, one of the last aisles you should look in then is that aisle. Ask yourself at the highest level, what is it that our product or idea or our brand delivers? And maybe you end up saying customer service. Customer service is at the core of what we do. Great customer service is what we need. And that may be at the highest level. Maybe you're a restaurant even, but customer service at the top. Great. Then ask yourself, who else does awesome customer service outside of the restaurant industry? How about Disney? How about Amazon? How about Nordstrom's? How about Zappos? How about the Ritz-Carlton? And then what you do is you go study how they think about that, and then steal it and remix it and pull it in. And when I say steal, I use that word because I was really inspired by a book by a guy named Austin Kleon called Steal Like an Artist. And definitely pick up that book, by the way. You'll love it. But in his book, he talks about how every creative knows nothing comes from nowhere. Everything is, stolen at a certain level. And then they build on to it. They add something new to it. They transform it. But he's got this awesome chart, which is worth the whole book in buying it in itself. And in this chart, it says good theft on one side and bad theft on the other. And on the good theft side, he said that's when you credit something, you transform it, you remix it, you make it something new. Bad theft is just when you plagiarize it. So there is good stealing. And, and it happens in Hollywood all the time. Pocahontas in space is Avatar, or Hamlet with animals is Lion King. So, I mean, it happens. Be provocative and inspiring. Storytellers, they know how to ask the hard questions, the questions that really make you think. They know how to pull you in. Again, they don't push it, they pull you into a narrative to really make you think about, what you're doing. And I mean, how many people on the phone have ever watched a movie and then left it and really started thinking about maybe some of your habits or life or relationships or something. I mean, stories can do that. They can absolutely make you question things and what's going on. And then stay tenacious enough to skin. I mean, and we've all been there, and that boy, you want to know something that people are critics of? Stories. My gosh, are they critics of them? Just read the reviews of whatever one of the hit movies is right now. Go to Rotten Tomatoes and read some of the fresh ratings and read some of the rotten ratings and see how they describe these. I mean, there's some of them are brutal. I mean, absolutely brutal. So you've got to be tenacious. You've got to have thick skin if you want to be in the storytelling business. I mean, if you want to, and it's going to happen with some of your products. Darn it, you're going to launch a product that just, boy, an initial research did great, and then it just bombs when it's out in the market. And, people say terrible things about it. Well, that's part of innovation. It's like Elon Musk says, if you're not failing, then you're not innovating. And Henry Ford and hundreds of others have said the exact same thing. I mean, that just comes with it. Jeff Bezos has got a great quote, which is, you know what, if you don't like critics, then don't do anything new or interesting. And that comes with stories as well. You just got to be tenacious and stick with it. So I only have time to talk one of these, and I want to talk personal stories. And personal stories are great because, like I said, they're one of the key ways that we can create influence and authenticity and approachability and share our experiences and show how those experiences have manifested into different beliefs and lessons and ideas. I mean, how many of you have ever been asked to, share an important lesson that you learned? I mean, we've all been asked that at some point. In fact, I was recently literally speaking at a conference where they wanted each speaker to start off with a 2 to 3 minute short story about a key lesson they've learned in life. And, one of the reasons they ask that is because they know, like this old quote says, life is 10% of what happens to you, 90% of what you learn from it. And one of the best ways to share lessons is through stories, right? So I'll share that story that I told with everybody. And I shared that I know that small things can have a big impact. That's one of the key lessons I've learned in life, especially as a designer. I know that sometimes the smallest detail in something can be the thing that is the most memorable. The smallest part of an experience or of a package or of a product or whatever, sometimes the smallest thing can be the thing that creates the most memorability. And so I decided to bring that to life through a story of why I started playing guitar. And I started playing guitar when I was young for one reason only. It was because of a band called Poison. And hopefully some of you know Poison. But gosh, one Saturday morning I woke up and I flipped on the TV to watch MTV. And this video came on for a song called Nothing But a Good Time. And when I saw that song, I was like, my gosh, yes, that is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a rock and roll guitarist. I mean, the energy in that song and just, the video, I loved it, just loved it. So I begged my mom for a guitar, and I got my first guitar, and I learned all of Poison's songs. And then and that guy became my idol. His name was CeCe DeVille, and he was the guitarist for Poison. I tried to learn at least everything that he could do. And then I got in my first band, and that's me with my Poison shirt on there in the middle. And what I didn't realize was there was someone watching me this whole time. They saw how much fun I was having, playing and learning this guitar and being in this band. They saw me, and it was my little brother. And so guess what my little brother wanted to do? He wanted to learn to play guitar. And so he did. He actually became an awesome guitarist. And then we played in bands together. And when I went, he played in my band that you see there eventually. And then also when I went off to college, he started up a new band and had me play in his band. So I would drive home on weekends and play in his band. And he's the one that I stayed with out in LA when I was studying film. because he pursued a career in music. And then I came to P&G and I got in a band called Soapbox. And that's because all of us worked on Tide when we met. And I've been in that band for almost 20 years. So almost the majority of my career, or almost all of my career, I should say, definitely the majority. And all three of my boys have grown up seeing me in this band. And they would hear me practice at home. And they would also come to some of the weekend gigs that we would play and things like that. And so guess what all three of my kids wanted to do? They also wanted to learn to play guitar, and they asked Dad to teach them. And so that's what I did. And now my middle son plays in that band with me. And one day this past summer when we were at a gig together and we were playing, I remember looking over and thinking to myself, wow, isn't it amazing what a 3-minute music video can do? Not only did it give me a lifelong hobby, but it created the absolute cherished moments of me playing in a band with my brother and also with my son. And that's how I know that the smallest things can have the biggest impact. So that's how to actually craft a quick short story, is ask yourself, what is the lesson? What is the moral? What is that idea, that center idea that's driving everything? And use that to guide it. I'll give you a quick P&G one. This is a young scientist named David. And David, believe it or not, had been put on an incredibly high-profile project when he was still very, very young. And he worked on that project for 7 years and had all failure for all 7 years. I'm not talking about some ups and downs. I mean, all failure. And at the end of, honestly, I can't believe the company let it go that long. But at the end of 7, I will tell you, the vice president said, we got to move him to something else. So go ahead and cancel the project. And his section head came to him, sat down with him and said, well, we decided to cancel the project and we're moving you over to this other one. And David was known as tenacious. He was. In fact, with the oral histories we have, he was known as even a tenacious pain in the ass. He was affectionately referred to as that because not only was he brilliant, but he wouldn't give up. When he had an idea, he just would not give up. My goodness, isn't that what you want in innovation anyway? You want someone who thinks like that. So he wouldn't give up, and he went to his section head as soon as he was told that they were canceling, and he said, listen, you know me. I'm not ready to give up yet. I need more time. Even after 7 years of failure, I need more time. And his boss said, well, all right, listen, I'll tell you what. As long as you don't write about what you're doing in any of your biweeklies, you can work on it in secret. Don't tell anybody. And, you know, all of P&G scientists have to fill out these things called SLRs, which are smart learning reports. And basically he was being told not to write in any of those what he was working on. And he didn't. And at year 9, he still had all failure. And at year 11, he finally had his first discovery, and it was just a small one, but my gosh, it's the first successful thing in 11 years in this project. And he was so excited. Guess what he did? He wrote about it. And the VP saw that write-up, and the VP pulled the AD and the section head both into his office. And this is the quote, literally said this to them: how can your fellows be messing around with a product we haven't even thought of making? You've got to stop it. And, you know, and if a VP told you to stop it, what would you do, right? Or if you are a VP, what would you expect people to do, right? I will tell you that AD and that section head went back to David after that meeting and told him, you know, we just took a lot of heat for your write-up that you did. But if you wanna keep working on it, we'll keep covering for you. But for goodness sakes, please, no more reports. At year 14, David finally had a prototype of this product, and they launched it a couple years later. And it was called Tide. And Tide launched in 1946 and was market leader by 1949 and has never left that position. And it tripled the size of the company in under a decade by itself. And is one of the largest technology platforms in the company's history because it really was instrumental in our move into beauty, into health, and it's what we bought Charmin with to move into paper. So tide was really important. And that's not the right picture of David that I showed in the beginning. This is the David back in the 30s that was put on this high profile project and refused to give up. And of course, what's the moral to that story? It is, there's two of them, right? And depending upon who my audience is, I change the direction. If it's a group of new hires, then I remind them that one company or one person in the company can completely change it. To stick with it. If you believe in the idea, don't give up on it. And of course, if I'm talking to managers, then the moral to that story is, are you giving your employees some room to explore their passion projects? And if they are incredibly passionate about an idea, how are you helping them? Because Tide is a story not only about a tenacious young scientist unwilling to give up, but also about a manager who was willing to support him and give him the space to explore. And those are the themes of those two stories. And so, again, much like the small things can have a big impact, always remember something that Edgar Allan Poe had said, which is that a short story needs that kind of, central idea, that focal point, that theme. That's what Hollywood calls this same idea, that moral, that lesson. And then you help wrap the story around that. And the cool thing about having a theme when you develop your story is it tells you what to keep and what to cut. It's an editing tool. And every sentence in your story should help build to that idea. Anything that doesn't support it, get rid of it. It could just be a distraction. So, think about it. What story would you share about an important lesson that you've learned? Try that sometime, record it, 2 or 3 minutes, just a quick short story. Could be a company story. It could be one of your employee stories around innovation. It could be your story. It could be a story about failure. It could be a story about collaboration, about leadership, about anything. I don't know. But think about what story would you share and what's the important lesson that you would put at the core of it. So that's the importance of personal stories. So to close, head and heart. Remember, not head or heart, head and heart. Pull them in with the heart, back it up with the head. Use that data, but make sure you give an emotional context behind what it really means and represents. Inspiring hero. Remember, the hero is the source of empathy. We don't pay for plots. We pay to see what the people do because of it, because that's how we can have empathy. I can't have empathy for a big giant ship, but I can have empathy for Jack and Rose, or for the passengers, or for the crew. And that's why that film works. Powerful obstacle. What is the challenge? What is it that they're trying to overcome? And again, remember what McKee said, your story is only as powerful as the forces of antagonism allow it to be. So focus on the right problem. If all of your competitors are focusing on the same basic problem, is there a way to kind of think about that problem differently then? Is there something deeper that you could share your story around? Motivating treasure. What is it they're after? What is it that they're trying to do? And think both high level and the very obvious, the emotional and the physical. There's always lots of motivations in things. And it just takes experimenting to understand what would truly move your hero sometimes. It may not be the most obvious one. It may require something more. And that comes from research. And personal stories. All of you have got powerful personal stories. Every person listening has powerful stories. Share those. They're such an important thing. Document them. One of the things that I do at P&G is I do a lot of the oral histories of people as they retire. And I can't tell you how impactful those are and how often we reference them. Because one of the first questions I ask anyone leaving the company is, if you could leave behind only one story for future generations to learn from, what would that be? And it's amazing the stories that I've got. Amazing. There's such wonderful ones out there. So share your personal stories. And the last one is practice. Storytelling, like anything, it's all practice. It's just like Malcolm Gladwell said, 10,000 hours, right? And it's what I had to learn when I first started into it. The more you practice it, the better you get, right? And it never stops. It never stops because things change and you have to keep practicing. So practice sharing stories. Or if you're more of a writer, practice writing stories. If you're more, you do visuals, then create more visual stories. Whatever it is, practice it. So I want to definitely also let any of you know. I know that we covered a lot of stuff very quickly in 40 minutes. So if any of you have any questions, please reach out to me at my email, which is storymythos@gmail.com. You can also get a hold of me through my site that you see listed there. But please reach out anytime with any questions. And thank you all so much for having me today.
Thank you, Shane. That was definitely very exciting to hear. And also, I loved your story about Soapbox. So thank you for sharing that. If anybody has any questions, please start writing them down so that we can start, so that I can start reading them to Shane in the couple of minutes that we have left. And starting with the first question, what has been your favorite story and inspiration?
That's a great one. So if I really go back and tell you which one really got me started in this kind of idea, it's Star Wars, and the 1977 original Star Wars. When I saw that as a kid, that got me drawing because I wanted to create those things that were on there. And then because of that, I ended up getting into industrial design. And because of that, I came to P&G. And because of that passion still from what Star Wars brought me, the story behind it and the drawing that led to me getting into the idea of making movies as well, which, I mean, you can see I can literally link back everything I'm doing today because I saw Star Wars as a little kid. And I will tell you one of my favorite stories to share inside and outside of P&G, but that's P&G related, um, is the David Byerly story. The David Byerly story is absolutely one of my favorites because it's such a story of dealing with obstacle and challenge. And I can't tell you how inspiring that has been to a lot of the employees that I've shared it, that when they realize, wow, I had no idea that kind of struggle was behind that brand. So, there's a bunch of them, honestly, but those are two of my favorites.
Yep, definitely makes sense. Attention spans are very short and they're getting shorter. What tips do you have for keeping the stories concise?
Sure. Well, the theme that I brought up at the end really helps because, once you know what the lesson is or the bigger idea, the focal point, the guiding idea of the story, you can use that to basically know what to keep and what to cut and start to trim up the story, where you need it. But honestly, a 30-second campaign all the way up to a 3-hour movie has the same basic, ingredients and steps in it. It's just, they just have to do it in shorter time. A Tide ad, if you look at, a classic Tide ad, from the 80s or something, it's, little Timmy's out in his baseball uniform and tomorrow's picture day and he shouldn't be playing in it, but he does and he gets it dirty, and he comes in and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And hey, tomorrow's picture day. So they set up the hero. They set up the obstacle quickly, which is, oh no, it's dirty and tomorrow's picture day. And then mom or dad takes the uniform, into the laundry room. They open up this cabinet and this orange bottle is up there that they then reach down, they grab, they pour it, dealing with that obstacle, right? And then the final scene is always that, there's little Timmy in front of, the with his team getting the picture taken, smiling. And then of course, at the end of those, it's not like the kid ever runs by the parents and hugs the bottle. The kid hugs, mom or dad, whoever did it for him. So we always do a good job at ensuring that our brands are the mentors and they're not the hero. The consumer is always the hero. And, that product is just there to help them deal with some of those obstacles, and all that's done in a quick, sometimes 15 seconds or 30 seconds. So doesn't matter the length. If the story is good, people will watch it. They'll read it. I mean, think about it. I'm sure a bunch of you on the phone have had a Netflix binge at some point where you got hooked on a particular show and you just, over a weekend consume the whole thing. Again, it's amazing if a story really connects with you, how much time and how you find the time to really dig into it. So I wouldn't get too concerned as much about the attention span and the time as much as if you have a great quality story, trust me, people will find the time.
Yep, yep. Yes. Well, thank you very, very much, Shane, for sharing your time and your story with us. It was definitely enlightening. Is there anything you want to say before we close?
Other than just like I said, please reach out, anybody, anytime, if you want to chat about this, you want more detail on something I said, 'cause I know I went through everything really, really fast. And again, it's storymythos at gmail.com. And please check out
Perfect.
my book if you get a chance.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shane, again.
Thank
And
you.
I'll take it back. So a couple of announcements a couple of announcements. All our webinars are recorded so that you can go back and review anything you want to listen to again or share with your friends via our P&G Alumni Network YouTube channel. We also invite you to get involved. Sign up for updates at pngalums.com, support the foundation, pngalums.com foundation, or partner with us as a sponsor. You can also volunteer, start or join a chapter, or if you have any other thoughts, you can please send us an email at hello@pngalums.com. Now, we invite you next month for our next webinar on April 9th at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, why our business and diversity initiatives are not working, with Rania Anderson. Thanks again for joining another exciting webinar. And this is your host, Ileana Rojas, and I wish you all a great rest of your day wherever in the world you may be. Thank you for joining.